Through the tiny barred window in cell number 312, the first rays of dawn penetrated the silence of the morning at Riverdale Prison was broken by a piercing scream. Officer David Parker, who was making his morning rounds, froze on the threshold of the cell on the concrete floor. In a pool of dark, almost black blood, lay the body of Eric Garcia. The 35-year-old inmate was dead. The deep cut on his neck left no doubt. "Code red, cell block C, cell 312. Parker's voice shook as he spoke into the walkie-talkie. A few minutes later, the corridor filled with guards and medical personnel. But the dead man no longer needed help. Dr. Natasha Kim only shook her head as she checked for a pulse. Death occurred approximately 6 to 8 hours ago, between 22 and 24 hours last night. Eric Garcia was a well-known figure in Riverdale. Serving a 15-year sentence for armed robbery and aggravated assault, he had managed to establish a certain standing among the inmates. Many feared him, some sought his patronage, and now he lay staring at the ceiling with glassy eyes. Detective Rachel Clark arrived at the prison an hour after the body was discovered. A tall woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and piercing gray eyes, she had a reputation for not backing down until she found answers. It was no coincidence that the Special Prison Crimes Unit had sent her in. Clark had the highest case-solving rate in the department. Who was the last person to see Garcia alive? Rachel's first question was addressed to the warden, Mr. Higgins, an older man with a military bearing. According to reports, the last check was at 21:30. Officer Martinez confirmed that Garcia was in the cell alone and alive. Alone? He didn't have a cellmate? There was Tyler Morse, but he wasn't in the cell during the evening check. He works in the laundry room and yesterday was his shift. Finished around 23 o'clock. Rachel frowned. So, theoretically, Garcia was killed when Morse returned to the cell. Possibly. But the cameras on the floor, they haven't worked for the last 2 days. Maintenance. Rachel raised an eyebrow skeptically. A surprisingly convenient coincidence for a killer. In the warden's office, Rachel studied the personnel files of the murdered man and his cellmate. Tyler Morse, 23 years old, was serving a 5-year sentence for burglary. First major offense, prior misdemeanor. Second year in prison, characterized as quiet, reserved, keeps to himself. "I want to talk to Morse and to Officer Parker, who found the body," she said, closing the folders. Tyler was led into the interrogation room, a small room with a metal table and 3 chairs. The young man looked pale and haggard. His blonde hair fell over his forehead. His hands trembled finely. "Mr. Morse, I'm Detective Clark. Tell me what happened last night." Tyler swallowed without raising his eyes. "I was working in the laundry room. Got back to my cell around 23:30. Eric was already asleep. At least it looked that way to me. It was dark. I lay down and fell asleep. And in the morning. They found him in the morning." "Did you notice anything strange? Blood on the floor? That your cellmate wasn't breathing?" "No, I was tired. And Eric? He often slept with his back turned to the wall." Rachel scrutinized Tyler's face. The young man was clearly nervous, but that could have been a natural reaction to the situation. "What was your relationship with Garcia like?" Tyler raised his eyes. Blue, almost transparent. "Normal. Like cellmates. He helped me. Protected me from the others." "Protected you? Did anyone hurt you?" "You understand how it is with people like me here," Tyler replied quietly. Rachel understood. A young, attractive guy in a maximum security prison was an easy target. And Garcia offered his defense. For free? Tyler lowered his eyes. "Nothing here is free, Detective." After talking to Tyler, Rachel met with Officer Parker, a sturdy, middle-aged man with a military haircut and a wary look. "Tell us how you discovered the body." "Morning rounds, 7 o'clock. The cell door was locked, as usual. I shined my flashlight inside. Morse was asleep on the top bunk. Garcia was lying on the floor covered in blood. I raised the alarm at once." "Did you notice anything unusual during the evening? Noise, yelling?" "Nothing, the night shift was quiet." "What about the relationship between Garcia and Morse?" Parker shrugged, but something akin to disgust flashed in his eyes. "Like most around here. The older one takes the younger one under his wing. Morse was to Garcia. Special." "In what way?" In the same way, Garcia kept him as his personal property, wouldn't let anyone even go near the guy. After talking to Officer Parker, Rachel headed to the prison infirmary. Dr. Natasha Kim, a short woman with intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses, was waiting for her with medical notes. Preliminary examination indicates that death was due to blood loss after a deep carotid artery cut. The weapon is most likely a shiv. They make them out of anything in prison, Dr. Kim explained. Rachel nodded. I need Garcia's medical records, and Morse's too. The doctor held out 2 folders. Here, notice the last entry in Garcia's chart. I had him in last week. Rachel opened the folder and froze. The date was March 12th. The test results: HIV positive. We did routine testing. Garcia turned out to be infected, the doctor explained. Did he know about the results? Yes, I informed him 5 days ago. How did he react? First shock, then anger. He demanded the results be rechecked, yelled that it was impossible. I had to call security. And Morse? Was he examined? Yes, his results came back negative, so far. Rachel tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. Were you aware of the nature of the relationship between Garcia and Morse? The doctor hesitated. Officially, no. But few things remain secret in prison, detective. Leaving the infirmary, Rachel decided to have another talk with Tyler. Now knowing Garcia's HIV status, she could ask more direct questions. The young inmate looked even more tense than he had in the morning. Mr. Morse, I have become aware of Eric Garcia's diagnosis. Were you aware of his HIV status? Tyler flinched, his eyes widening. What? No, I didn't. What are you talking about? Garcia found out about his diagnosis 5 days ago. Given your close relationship, I thought he might have told you. We didn't have a relationship. Tyler's voice trailed off. He was my cellmate, that's all. That's not what Officer Parker and the other inmates say. Tyler's face contorted. So? You think I killed him because of that? Yeah, okay, we were close. But I didn't know about his illness, I swear. If I had known... What? What would you have done, Tyler? Morse covered his face with his hands. I don't know. I'd have been... scared, I guess. Rachel watched the young man carefully. The fear in his eyes seemed genuine, but something in his story didn't add up. Tell me again what happened last night, every detail. I already told you. Worked in the laundry until 23 o'clock, then a shower and into the cell. Can anyone confirm you were in the laundry room the whole time? Tyler tensed. Officer Wilson. He was on duty. And after the laundry room, who did you cross paths with on the way to your cell? No one. I mean, I saw Officer Parker in the hallway of cell block C. Rachel made a mental note. Interesting, because Officer Parker told me he spent the entire evening in the other wing of the jail. Tyler's eyes went wide. Then I was mistaken. It was dark. I could have gotten confused. After her second conversation with Tyler, Rachel talked to several inmates from cell block C. None admitted to hearing anything suspicious during the night, but one of them, an older man with tattoos covering every inch of his arms, volunteered to talk privately. Garcia and Morse, they've been together for 6 months. Not for love, of course. Garcia protected the boy, and the boy paid with, you know what? Do you know about their conflicts lately? Eric's been angry, very angry last week, yelling at the boy, accusing him of something. I don't know what, but he looked like he was ready to kill him. Rachel returned to the warden's office to review the camera footage from the past week. Even though they hadn't been working the night of the murder, the tapes from the previous days could provide clues to the motive. On one of the tapes, she saw Eric Garcia arguing furiously with some inmate in the mess hall. Zooming in on the image, she recognized Tyler. Garcia's face was contorted with anger. He was almost screaming. Tyler looked frightened, tried to explain something, but Garcia pushed him away and walked away. The date of the recording was March 14th, the day after Garcia learned of his diagnosis. Rachel wondered. Perhaps Garcia blamed Tyler for his infection, but that contradicted the medical records. Tyler was HIV negative, unless it was someone else. She decided to talk to Dr. Kim again. Could Morse's results have been wrong? Or maybe the infection just didn't have time to show up in the tests? Dr. Kim shook her head. The test can only fail to show infection during the window period, the first 2 to 4 weeks after infection. Morse was tested the same day as Garcia. His results came back negative. What if Garcia was infected by someone else? The doctor hesitated. It's possible, but given the nature of their relationship with Morse and how jealously Garcia guarded him, are there any other HIV-positive inmates in this unit? Yes, 3, but that's confidential. Dr. Kim, we have a homicide. I think doctor-patient confidentiality takes a back seat in this case. The doctor reluctantly pulled out a list. Rachel ran her eyes over the names and stopped at one. Officer David Parker. Parker? But he's not a prisoner. He's been undergoing treatment for several years now. Strictly confidential, of course. Rachel leaned back in her chair, mulling over the new information. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but there was still something missing. She decided to question Officer Parker again, but this time in private, off the record. Prison cell block C had fallen into a tense silence since the murder of Eric Garcia. Inmates spoke in whispers, guards became more vigilant, and Rachel Clark methodically assembled a puzzle of conflicting testimony and ulterior motives. On the second day of the investigation, Rachel gained access to the archive of video footage from the past 3 months. In a small room with flickering monitors, she immersed herself in prison life as she watched Eric and Tyler interact. The first thing that caught her eye was the apparent hierarchy of their relationship. Eric Garcia, with his imposing physique and tattoos covering his arms and neck, always held a commanding presence. Tyler followed a step behind, never raising his eyes when Eric spoke. The classic defense attorney-defendant dynamic so typical of prison life. On the tape from February 10th, Rachel noticed one of the inmates in the mess hall try to sit next to Tyler. Eric's reaction was instantaneous. He grabbed the insolent man by the collar and hissed something. No one else tried to approach Tyler. Possessive behavior, Rachel muttered, taking notes. But there was something else to their interaction. In the rare moments when they thought no one could see them, brief touches, exchanges of glances, the relationship seemed almost tender. On a recording from March 1st, Rachel discovered something interesting. Tyler was talking to Officer Parker in an empty hallway. The conversation looked tense. Tyler was gesturing vigorously. Parker stood with his arms crossed over his chest. Then the guard looked around and handed Tyler a small package, which he quickly tucked into his pocket. What was that? Rachel rewound the tape and zoomed in on the image. It was too small to distinguish, but it was clearly an unauthorized exchange. She scrolled down the tapes further. March 5th. Eric and Tyler are in the library. Tyler hands Eric a small package similar to the one he received from Parker. March 7th. Eric meets with another inmate in the laundry room. Another exchange. Drugs, Rachel assumed. Typical prison scheme. A guard brings the goods, one inmate distributes, another guards the operation. But then, why was Eric letting Tyler meet with Parker alone? With his possessive nature, it seemed odd. Rachel decided to question a few more prisoners. The first was Marcus Johnson, a 40-year-old man serving time for fraud. Intelligent, observant, with a reputation for knowing everything about everyone. Garcia and Morse? Of course I knew about them. Everybody knew. Garcia took the kid under his wing from day one. Tyler was too handsome for his own good, if you know what I mean. And Eric protected him. In exchange for favors? Johnson grinned. At first, yes, but then things changed. Tyler turned out to be a smart guy, found a way to become valuable for more than just his looks. In what way? Connections on the outside. His brother works for a pharmaceutical company. You know what I mean? Pills are valued above money here. Rachel frowned. Are you talking about drugs? I'm talking about business, detective. Some people here need painkillers, some need sleeping pills, some need something a little more fun. Tyler became the liaison between the outside world and the prison, and Eric provided protection for the operation. They were partners. And Officer Parker? Johnson fell silent, scrutinizing Rachel. You're digging well, detective. Yes, he was part of the scheme. Sneaked the merchandise in, turned a blind eye when needed. For a percentage, of course. So Eric, Tyler, and Parker were working together. What could have gone wrong? Eric found out about his illness. That changed everything. Rachel leaned closer. Did he think he contracted it from Tyler? No, from Parker. Rachel froze. What? Johnson lowered his voice. Parker and Eric, they had a history, a long one. Eric always favored power, being on top, if you understand. With Tyler, yes, but with Parker. Parker was the only one Eric would let. And when Eric found out about his diagnosis, he thought he'd contracted it from Parker. Exactly. Made a scene, threatened to expose him to the administration, both about the disease and the drugs. And that's career-ending for Parker, you know? This information changed the picture completely. Rachel thanked Johnson and immediately went in search of Officer Parker. She found him in the security room reviewing camera footage. "Officer Parker, I need to ask you some additional questions." Parker tensed, but nodded. "Of course, Detective. In private." Rachel nodded toward the door. In the empty office, she got straight to the point. "Tell me about your relationship with Eric Garcia." "I've already told you. The standard guard-prisoner relationship. What about the non-standard ones? Like drug smuggling, for example?" Parker's face petrified. "I don't know what you mean." "I have records, officer. You're passing something to Tyler Morse on the 1st of March. Tyler passes it on to Eric. I think the three of you were business partners, and I also know about your HIV status." Parker turned pale. "That's confidential medical information. You have no right to—" "I have every right when it comes to murder. Eric found out about his diagnosis and thought he'd contracted it from you, right? He threatened to expose you, so you decided to stop him." "That's nonsense. I didn't kill him." "Where were you on the evening of March 17th between 22 and 24 hours? "On duty in Block A, you can check that in the logbook." Rachel made a note. "I'll check. In the meantime, tell me about your contraband." Parker gave up. "It wasn't drugs. At least not all of them. Mostly antibiotics, painkillers, blood pressure meds. Stuff that's hard to get here officially." "And how did the scheme work?" "Tyler's brother works for a pharmaceutical company. He supplied the pills, I snuck them in, Eric and Tyler distributed them. Everyone benefited." "And when did Eric find out about his diagnosis?" Parker averted his gaze. "He freaked out, decided I'd infected him, screamed, threatened to turn everyone in." "And you killed him?" "No, I swear I didn't touch him. I was in a different cell block that night altogether." Rachel scrutinized Parker's face. He looked scared, but sincere, or was a very good actor. "I'll check your alibi. In the meantime, you're suspended from duty." After talking to Parker, Rachel met with Dr. Kim again to clarify the medical details. "When exactly did you inform Garcia of his diagnosis?" "On March 12th, a Tuesday. He came in for his appointment around 14 o'clock. "How did he react?" "At first he didn't believe it. Then he got angry. Blamed everyone, the lab, me, the prison administration. Said it was impossible, that he'd always been the dominant party." "And did you inform him that Officer Parker is also HIV positive?" Dr. Kim looked at Rachel in exasperation. "Of course not. That's a violation of doctor-patient confidentiality." "But Garcia somehow found out." "Maybe. Secrets don't last long in prison." "What about Tyler Morse? When was the last time he was tested?" The doctor checked the records. March 6th came back negative, but there's an oddity. He insisted on retesting on March 12th, the same day Garcia learned of his diagnosis. "And the result? Also negative." Rachel wondered. Why would he suddenly want to retest a result from a week ago? "I don't know. Seemed nervous, asked me to keep it a secret." "From who?" "Didn't say, but I'm guessing Garcia." The picture was slowly coming together, but still not completely. Rachel decided to talk to Tyler again. The young man looked even more haggard than the day before. There were shadows under his eyes, and his hands were trembling finely. "Mr. Morse, I know about your business with Eric and Officer Parker." Tyler flinched but didn't deny it. "We didn't hurt anyone. Except for those who took contraband drugs without a prescription or medical supervision?" "That's better than what they would have taken otherwise," Tyler replied quietly. "Tell me about your relationship with Eric, a real relationship." Tyler was silent for a long time, then spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "At first it was a deal. He protects me. I provide favors. Then I found a way to be useful in a different way. My brother works in pharmaceuticals. He agreed to help. Eric appreciated my initiative. Our relationship changed." "You fell in love with him?" It wasn't a question. Tyler lowered his head. Sounds silly, doesn't it? Falling in love with a man who basically used me, but Eric wasn't always so tough. In private, he was different. What about Officer Parker? Did you know about his relationship with Eric? Tyler's face contorted. Knew. Eric, he had his own needs. Things he couldn't get from me. Parker was giving it to him. And you were okay with that? No, but I had no choice. I was afraid of losing Eric's protection. When did you find out about Eric's diagnosis? Tyler froze. I didn't know. You retested for HIV the same day Eric learned of his diagnosis. Why, if you didn't know? Tyler turned pale. Yep. I saw his medical records, by accident. He left it in his cell. I read it and got scared. But you didn't tell him about it? No. He would have killed me. Why? If you didn't know about his diagnosis before? Because he would have assumed I'd told everyone, and his reputation would have been ruined. Rachel scrutinized Tyler's face. Something about his story still wasn't adding up. Are you sure there's nothing else you want to tell me? Tyler shook his head without looking up. After talking to Tyler, Rachel checked Officer Parker's alibi. The duty log confirmed what he said. He had indeed been in cell block A at the other end of the prison on the night of the murder. The next step was to examine the cells in block A. To her surprise, Rachel found Parker on all the key tapes. He was indeed where he claimed to be. So it's not him, Rachel muttered, returning to her notes. She decided to dig deeper into the prison's finances. With the help of the staff accountant, she discovered a series of strange transactions involving the drug warehouse. Large shipments of antibiotics and painkillers were being purchased, but far fewer were reaching the inmates. Who's in charge of receiving the medications? Rachel asked. Dr. Kim signs the delivery notes, and the physical receiving is done by Nurse Collins. Nurse Collins turned out to be a nervous, middle-aged man with running eyes. When asked about the missing medications, he immediately broke down. It was Dr. Kim's idea. She said small batches no one would notice and we could split the money. Rachel was shocked. Dr. Kim is involved in stealing the medication? Yes! She organized the whole thing. Parker was sneaking some into the prison to sell to the inmates, and we sold the rest over the internet. This new information required an immediate conversation with Dr. Kim. Rachel found her in her private office going through some files. Dr. Kim, I have questions about the missing medication. The doctor looked up, her face remaining impassive. I don't know what you mean, but Nurse Collins confessed to everything. You organized a scheme to steal medication from the prison supply. Some of it was sold to inmates through Eric Garcia and Tyler Morse. Some of it went on the black market. Dr. Kim's face twitched. You have no proof. I have Collins' testimony, and I'm sure Parker will talk too when he finds out you tried to frame him for Garcia's murder. I didn't frame anyone. No? You deliberately mentioned Parker's HIV status, knowing it would give him motive for murder. Dr. Kim was silent, contemplating the situation. Okay, yes, we had a scheme, but I had nothing to do with Garcia's murder. Tell me about your relationship with him. Purely professional. Really? What about the fact that you were the one who informed him that Parker was HIV positive? Dr. Kim turned pale. How did you... Garcia found out about his diagnosis and made a scene, threatened to expose your scheme. So you decided to direct his anger at Parker by violating doctor-patient confidentiality. Dr. Kim lowered her head. He blackmailed me, demanded more drugs, more money, threatened to tell me everything. I panicked, and told him he probably got the infection from Parker. Yes, you knew it would cause conflict between them. I was hoping Garcia would focus on Parker and leave me alone. Rachel shook her head. Instead, Garcia decided to blackmail you both, and someone decided to stop him. It wasn't me. Where were you on the evening of March 17th between 22 and 24 hours? At home. I have witnesses. I had dinner with friends until 23:30. Rachel made a note. Another alibi to check. By the end of the second day of the investigation, Rachel began to see the full picture of prison corruption. Dr. Kim, Nurse Collins, and Officer Parker had orchestrated a scheme to steal and sell drugs. Eric Garcia and Tyler Morse were their distributors to the inmates. When Eric learned of his HIV status, he began blackmailing a doctor and a guard. Dr. Kim directed his anger at Parker by revealing confidential medical information. But that didn't stop Eric. He continued to pressure everyone involved in the scheme, demanding more money and power. And someone decided that Eric had become too dangerous. Rachel went back to the surveillance footage, scrutinizing the last day of Eric Garcia's life. She noticed another detail. On the afternoon of March 17th, Eric met with Tyler in the library. The conversation seemed tense. Tyler argued something fervently. Eric shook his head negatively. Then Eric roughly grabbed Tyler's arm and hissed something in his face. "What happened between you two that day?" That question demanded an answer. The third day of the investigation began for Rachel Clark with a thorough examination of the cell where Eric Garcia's body was found. Even though the forensics team had already investigated the room, she felt they might have missed something. The small cell held its secrets, and Rachel was determined to uncover them. She slowly went through the dead man's personal belongings, a couple of tattered books, photographs, a few letters from his mother. At first glance, nothing remarkable. But when Rachel opened Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, a folded piece of paper fell out between the pages. It was a letter, written in Eric's confident, sharp handwriting. It was dated March 16th, the day before the murder. "If you're reading this, it means I'm already dead or soon will be. I'm not afraid of death. After what I've learned, life has lost its meaning anyway. They all betrayed me. Every damn person I trusted Kim with her fake worries is a liar, a thief. Parker, who used me all these years knowing he was sick, is a damn coward. But worst of all is Tyler. I really believed there was something between us. Something real. And all this time he was just getting revenge. Not on me, on Parker. I was just a pawn in their game. Not anymore. I've compiled a full report on each of them. Names, dates, patterns, evidence. Everything you need to put them away for years. The documents are hidden where no one would think to look. In the spine of a Bible in the prison chapel, third shelf from the left. Whichever one of them got to me first doesn't matter. I still won. They destroyed me, but I'll take them with me." Rachel reread the letter twice before getting up and hurrying to the prison chapel. It was a small room with several rows of pews and a simple altar. A bookcase stood against the far wall, the third shelf on the left, just as Eric had indicated. Among several tattered Bibles, she found one with a slightly bumped spine. Carefully, she pulled out the folded sheets of paper hidden inside. They were pages torn from a notebook, filled with small, neat handwriting. Eric had compiled a detailed report on prison corruption, drug smuggling schemes, names of inmates and staff involved, dates, amounts. A separate section was devoted to the personal relationships between those involved in the scheme, including details of the intimate relationship between Eric and Parker. David Parker knew of his HIV status for at least 3 years, intentionally hid this fact from his partners. Dr. Natasha Kim covered for him, ensuring his confidentiality in exchange for his involvement in drug smuggling. Rachel turned the page and froze. The last section was titled, Tyler Morse's Confession. March 17th. Tyler finally confessed. All this time he's been using me to get revenge on Parker. They're related. Cousins. According to Tyler, Parker raped him as a child. When Tyler got to Riverdale and found out Parker worked here, he devised a plan for revenge. Knew about my relationship with Parker and decided to take me away from him. Knew about Parker's HIV status as well, but didn't warn me, hoping I would get infected and indirectly get back at him. Ironically, I did get infected, but not from Parker. That rat Rodriguez cut me with a shiv 2 months ago. And now I'm dying, and Tyler looks at me with his innocent blue eyes and tells me he loves me. It's too late, baby. Too late for all of us. With these documents, Rachel now had a complete picture of events and motives. But the main question remained unanswered. Who killed Eric Garcia? She went back to the surveillance footage, scrutinizing the last hours of Eric's life. At 23:20, a few minutes before Tyler returned from the laundry room, the cameras captured a figure in a security guard's uniform. Stopping briefly at camera 312, Rachel zoomed in, but the guard's face was not visible. She requested a complete list of the guards on duty that night and their movements around the prison. And she found an interesting coincidence. Officer Martinez, who was supposed to be patrolling Cell Block C, was absent from his sector from 23:15 to 23:35, just as the unknown guard had looked into Eric's cell. Rachel called Officer Martinez in for questioning. The young guard was visibly nervous. "Officer Martinez, where were you on the evening of March 17th between 23:15 and 23:35? Rachel asked, watching his reaction carefully. "Patrolling my sector as usual." "Records show you weren't in Block C at the time." Martinez turned pale. "I may have gone to the restroom." "For 20 minutes? And why did the cameras pick up someone in a guard's uniform looking into Eric Garcia's cell at 23:20? Martinez was silent, his hands visibly shaking. "Officer Martinez, I have reason to believe that you are involved in the murder of Eric Garcia. If you cooperate with the investigation now, it will be taken into account by the court." Martinez covered his face with his hands. "I didn't kill him. I just opened the door." "Opened the door? To who?" "Dr. Kim. She said she needed to check on Garcia's condition right away. Something about the side effects of the new medication. I didn't know she was going to. I swear I didn't know." Rachel frowned. "Dr. Natasha Kim was in Eric Garcia's cell on the evening of March 17th. "Yes. Asked me to open the door, said it was urgent. I waited in the hallway. She was there for about 5 minutes, no more." "What happened then?" "She came out and told me Garcia was asleep and not to disturb him until morning. Said he'd taken a strong sleeping pill." "And you didn't check his condition?" "No. Dr. Kim, she's the authority around here. If she says the prisoner is fine, we don't argue." Rachel immediately went in search of Dr. Kim. She found her in the administration building packing up her personal belongings. She had been suspended after admitting to drug smuggling. "Dr. Kim, Officer Martinez just admitted to letting you into Eric Garcia's cell on the evening of March 17th, shortly before his death." Dr. Kim froze, holding up a framed photograph. "That's a lie. I was not in his cell. We have witness statements and the DNA results from the crime scene are coming soon. It's better to tell the truth now." Dr. Kim sank slowly into her chair, her normally confident face contorted. "You don't understand. Eric threatened to destroy us all. He had proof, names, dates. He was going to ruin the lives of dozens of people. Is that why you killed him?" "I didn't mean to. I came to talk to him, to convince him to keep his silence. Offered money, connections on the outside, anything I could." He laughed in my face. "And then you killed him." Dr. Kim closed her eyes. "I had no choice. He said he'd left a detailed report in a safe place, that he would give it to the warden in the morning. It was the end for all of us. For me, for Parker, for so many others." "Where did you get the weapon?" "The shiv was in the cell, under Eric's mattress. He showed it to me himself, bragging about taking it from Parker. Said it was symbolic. Parker's weapon would be his defense against us all. He didn't expect you to use it against him. No one expected it. I didn't expect it myself. It happened so fast. He turned away, and I saw the shiv, and the next thing I knew, there was blood. Everywhere. And Tyler? He came back right after you did. Why didn't he raise the alarm?" "I don't know. Maybe didn't notice in the dark, or too scared, or—" Dr. Kim suddenly fell silent, realizing something. "Or was in cahoots with you," Rachel finished for her. "No, I acted alone. Tyler didn't know anything." Rachel watched Dr. Kim carefully. Her story sounded plausible, but something still didn't add up. If Tyler wasn't involved in the murder, why hadn't he noticed the dead cellmate? She decided to question Tyler Morse again. The young inmate looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept since Eric's death. "Mr. Morse, I just spoke with Dr. Kim. She confessed to killing Eric Garcia." Tyler looked up. His eyes read not surprise, but a strange relief in them. "I knew it wasn't Parker. He wouldn't have made it." "Wait, Dr. Kim says she entered the cell around 23:20, talked to Eric, and then killed him with a shiv he kept under his mattress. You returned to the cell about 15 minutes after that, and you claim you didn't notice the body on the floor?" Tyler remained silent, avoiding her gaze. "Mr. Morse, I want the truth. All this time you've been hiding something." Tyler took a deep breath. "I saw him. Of course you did. Eric was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Dead, yeah. I panicked. But you didn't raise the alarm." "No, I thought I'd be blamed. I had a motive. Eric found out about my revenge plan. I was his cellmate. Who would believe I didn't kill him? Is that why you pretended you didn't notice? You went to sleep next to the corpse? Yes, it sounds crazy, I know, but at that moment, I was in shock. Couldn't think clearly. Decided it was better to wait until morning when the body was discovered by the guards. And let the real killer get away with it? Tyler looked up at last. I didn't know who killed him. Thought it was Parker, but he hated me more than he hated Eric. If I had raised the alarm, he would have found a way to blame me. Tyler's story added to the picture of events, but Rachel still wasn't completely satisfied. She returned to Dr. Kim for a final questioning. Dr. Kim, I'm prepared to accept your confession to the murder of Eric Garcia, but I want to clear up a few details first. I've already covered everything. Not exactly. Tyler Morse admitted to seeing Eric's body when he returned to his cell, but didn't raise the alarm for fear of being accused of murder. Dr. Kim frowned. That's odd. I was sure he wouldn't notice in the dark. I also found Eric's letter and his detailed report on prison corruption. He really did gather evidence against all of you. Dr. Kim's face contorted. Where did you find the report? In the prison chapel, hidden in the spine of a Bible. Exactly where Eric wrote that he hid it. Wrote it? Where? In a suicide letter. He knew one of you would try to kill him, so he prepared. Dr. Kim turned pale. I didn't know about the letter. And you couldn't have known because Eric wrote it after your conversation on March 16th, when you threatened him. He realized even then that his life was in danger. There was a long pause. Dr. Kim sat motionless, staring at one point. I want to hear the full truth, Dr. Kim, from the beginning. The doctor took a deep breath. It all started 2 years ago, with drug smuggling, a small scheme. I forged documents. Collins was a distraction at intake. Parker was sneaking some of the pills to the inmates. Eric Garcia and Tyler Morse distributed them to other inmates. Everyone was getting their share. But then something went wrong. Eric got greedy, demanded more money, more power. When he found out about his HIV status, he went completely crazy, threatened to expose all of us if we didn't meet his demands. And what were his demands? First, money, a lot of money. Then help with parole. I explained that I couldn't provide that, but he wouldn't listen. He was sure I could fake medical reports, influence the commission. And that's when you decided to kill him. Not right away. At first I tried to negotiate. On March 16th, I met with him in the infirmary, offered a compromise. He refused, threatened to turn over all the evidence to the warden on the morning of March 18th. And you chose murder. I panicked. My whole life, my career, everything was in jeopardy. On the 17th night, I asked Martinez to open the cell, ostensibly for an emergency medical examination. Eric was lying on the bunk, looking calm, almost peaceful. Said he'd been waiting for me. He knew you were coming? Yes, said I was the most obvious candidate. Parker's too cowardly and Tyler's too in love, was how he put it. Showed me the shiv under the mattress, said it was for self-defense. I saw an opportunity and, I took it. One blow and it was over. And then? Panic. Horror at what I'd done. I ran out of the cell, told Martinez that Garcia was asleep and not to be disturbed until morning. I came home and sat in a daze all night waiting for someone to come for me. Rachel studied Dr. Kim's face carefully. The story finally came together completely. Motive, opportunity, evidence. Everything pointed to the doctor's guilt. Dr. Natasha Kim, you're under arrest for the murder of Eric Garcia, Rachel pronounced, pulling out the handcuffs. A week later, as she finished her investigative report, Rachel reflected on the tragedy that had played out at Riverdale Prison. The system designed to reform criminals was itself creating new crimes. Corruption, violence, blackmail. The prison walls not only kept inmates inside, but also hid dark secrets from the outside world. Dr. Natasha Kim confessed to murder and awaited trial. Officer David Parker was suspended and under investigation for drug smuggling and abuse of power. Nurse Collins cooperated with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. As for Tyler Morse, Rachel was moved by his story. A young man crippled by childhood abuse, who sought revenge and found new trauma instead. He wasn't charged with accessory to murder, but he received extra time for covering up the crime. On the last day of the investigation, Rachel visited Tyler in his new cell in another cell block. "How are you doing?" she asked. Tyler shrugged. "Getting on with life. What else is there to do?" "Did you really love him, Eric?" Tyler was silent for a long moment before answering. "I don't know what love is, Detective. I only know that when he died, something died in me too." "And your revenge? Do you feel it's accomplished?" "No. Revenge solves nothing. Doesn't bring back what was lost. Doesn't heal wounds. I realized that too late." Rachel nodded. "What's next?" "I'll serve my time. Try to start over. Maybe someday I'll learn to forgive. Others and myself." As she left prison, Rachel thought about the vicious cycle of violence and revenge, about a system that exacerbates problems rather than solves them, about people trapped not only behind bars, but also in their traumas, fears, and despair. Perhaps true justice begins not with punishment, but with healing, not with isolation, but with understanding. But in a world of rigid rules and high walls, the path to such justice seemed infinitely long. Rachel got into her car and took one last look at the grim building of Riverdale Prison. Behind its walls remained broken fates, unfulfilled hopes, and stories that should never have happened. But it also held a lesson about how easily despair can push a person over the edge.